Okay, good. Yeah, so we're up to Yud Dalet on the base. The Mishnah. Yeah, we'll talk for the Mishnah. Zog the Heilige Mishnah. I didn't even make Birchas Torah yet. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Tzoi sev tzvana v'asoik b'du v'yisar v'abnach v'yalem tzei v'shos v'vinit v'tach v'yisol v'neinach v'tzoyin 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 v'yisol v'noi v'shmach v'yisol sefer l'shmo Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. Okay, Zog the Heilige Mishnah. Nitmas achas min hachalois. One of the chalois became tamei. We're talking about by the shtei halechem. Oy echad min hasedorim, or by the lechem upon him, one full row became tamei. Rabbi Yehuda Omer shneim yetu lebeis reifa. You can't do the haktoris halavoina. You can't do the shchit of the kivzei atzeres and the zrik of the dam to be mater the chalois, because since some of them are tamei, the whole thing is disqualified. She'ein carbon sibur chalak. You can't have half kosher, half not kosher. You throw the whole thing out. Avada the zrika will work, or the aktar shalavoina will work, and whatever is tamei you won't be able to eat. Whatever is not tamei you will be able to eat. Gewaltig. Amar Rebbe Lozer, machloikes lefnei zrika. The whole machloikes is if it became tamei before the zrika, or before the haktaris halavoina. Aval la'achar zrika, if the kachim already became mutter, the shtei alechem already was released to the kaihanim, divrei akoyel hatamei b'tumosei v'ator yachel. Everybody would agree it's like any other meat. It's already had a heter. The heter went on it because everything was tar at the time of the zrika, and now whatever became tamei you won't eat, but whatever is tar can be eaten. Zog to Gemara ulefnei zrika b'may pligi. What is the machloikis? It seems to be a machloikis if zrika works, if not all the davar hanitar is royu, is tar. Omar Papa, no, the machloikis is something else. But tzitz meratze ala chilois kamifli. We know that tzitz is meratze on kochim that becomes tamei, that it should be nisratze to be placed on the mizbeach. But will the tzitz also be meratze by something that's tamei, that it should become roy lachila? That's the whole machlokes. Zog to Gemara. Rabbanon Tzavri, the Rabbanon hold hatzitz meratze al achilos, and therefore even though some of the lechamim became tamei, or one lechem from the kivsei atzeres became tamei, nevertheless the tzitz will still be meratze on the entire carbon, and the part that's tar you will be able to eat. Rabbi Yehuda Sover, ein hatzitz meratze al achilos. The tzitz is maratza only for something that has to be placed on the mizbeach, that it can be placed on the mizbeach even though it's tamei. But it's not maratza on something that's tamei that was supposed to be eaten. As Rashi says, Rabbanon Tzavri, it's maratza al tumas achilas kaihanim l'mahav zrika shenizrak aleim zrika mal yosa. The tzitz is maratza that will qualify the zrika even though there's tum over here. Umiyu ki maratza tzitz. That's the mahava carbon ma'alya. That'll just make it a carbon ma'alya. It's not going to make it tahar. So therefore, aval tamei, the breads that became tamei, lo mishbir b'achila. No one's going to suggest that the tzitz will allow you to eat a dover tamei. It just says that at least it will be maratza on the other chalois that remain tahar. Why can't you the tzitz be maratza on even the tamei? The overlay lav. There's a lav that specifically prohibits eating kachim that's tamei, v'abosar asher yiga b'chal tamei lo yeyachel. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Ma'ayin meratze b'tuma shenoga b'dvar hanecha l'kayhanim." If tuma touched any part of what needs to be eaten by the kahanim, the tzitz will not be meratze on that at all. Hilchach lahav zrika malya, which now disqualifies the zrika. If the zrika is disqualified, v'lo mystery tahar. Then even the breads that were tar did not get the heter zrika. Amalei Rav Huna b'reider Rav Nosson or Papa. That cannot possibly be the machlokes as to whether or not it is maratze. I'm going to prove it to you. Because v'ha'oilin, if you're talking about something that all goes up on the mizbeach, such as, Dr. Rashi, v'ha'oilin the divra kol tzitz maratze al tuma shenoga ba'oilin l'mizbeach. The tzitz is maratze. Everyone's moided tzitz is maratze al oilin, even Rabbi Yehuda is. But yet Rabbi Yehuda still argues. So if the whole shaila is if tzitz is maratza on ne'echolin, why does Rabbi Yehuda argue even in a case where the entire question is whether they're oil mizbeach. Upli, Rabbi Yehuda argues there as well. Titania, we have a brayso as follows: Nitma echad min habozichen. What if one of the bozichen became tamei? Could you at least be maktir the other boziach of levoina on the mizbeach? We're talking clearly about the lechem aponim. Rabbi Yehuda mishneim yasu betuma. You might as well make them both tamei. You might as well let them even touch each other. You know why? Lefi she'ein carbon tzibur chalak. You don't split up a carbon tzibur. V'chachamim oimrim hatamei b'tomasoi v'atar b'tairasoi, because the tzitz will be meratzeh. So oy bazoi, why would Rabbi Yehuda argue? Everybody holds by oilin, such as the lavonia that goes on the mizbeach, the tzitz is meratzeh. So why did Rabbi Yehuda say you might as well make everything tamei? If the whole reason for his machlokes in our Mishnah is only whether or not the tzitz is meratzeh. V'oid, I'll bring you another case where it has nothing to do with the tzitz being meratzeh, because the tzitz is only meratzeh on if the carbon became tamei. But a tzitz being meratzeh will never allow a person who's tamei to do the avodah. And v'oid Amar Rabashi Toshba, Rabbi Yehuda Omer about a carbon pesach on the erev pesach. When the time comes to shech the carbon pesach, afilu shevet echad tamei, even if one full shevet is tamei, it tumah hotra b'tzibur. Everyone does it b'tumah. As Rashi says, shevet echad tamei b'yudal b'nisan on erev pesach. The whole tzibur does it b'tumah. Al tumah hotra b'tzibur. It's only one shevet. The svir leather Rabbi Yehuda shevet echad ikri kahal. The Torah says if the kahal is tamei, you make the carbon b'tumah. And even only one shevet is considered kahal. Hilchach doichatuma. It will be doichatuma. The yasu kulon b'tumah imon. All of Klal Yisrael could do it b'tumah. Could be makir the carbon b'tumah b'tumah together with that one shevet that is tamei. L'vish ein carbon tzibur cholak. You don't split up a carbon tzibur. L'divrei chachamim tahirim oisim harishain. Only the tahirim do the pesach rishon, and v'shevet that's tamei oisim pesach sheni. They'll have to wait till Pesach Sheni. You won't have the heter of Tumah Hotra B'tzibur. So Tashma Rabbi Yehuda Omer Afilu Shevet Echad Tamei V'Chol Shvatim Dorim Yatsa B'Tumah. 1 second. Livish Ein Karbonas Tzibur Chaluk. So over here, this has nothing to do with the tzitz. There's no tzitz over here at all. So over here, there is no tzitz. What are you saying?
According to the Chachamim, what do you mean by tzitz meratze? You don't allow the tumah to go up.
In which case? In our case, in our Mishnah, what you gain by the tzitz meratze is that the zrika on the entirety of the two lachmei yatzeres, right, will be chal to be matir them lachila. So the one that was Torah, you'll be able to eat it.
Only the Torah.
Correct. Even though the carbon as a whole has psul in it, and therefore maybe the zrika shouldn't work at all, it will work. It will work. Now, it doesn't take off the tumah, but it will work. Even the tumah apart got the ritzui of the zrika. Now the question is, could you eat it or not? But now it becomes a local problem, not a global problem. The Yoidom Ravina said something else. Toshma nitmas achas minachalois oy achas minasadorin. Rabbi Yehuda Omer shneim yetzu leveis esreifa. Everything gets burnt. I think that's our Mishnah. Why? Levish ein tzibur carbon tzibur chalak. Rabbi Yehuda actually says in the Mishnah what his reason is. Why would Rav Papa come up with a new reason that it's totally in whether or not the tzitz is meratze? Rabbi Yehuda was very clear in articulating why he said his psak. Levish tzibur chalak. You cannot split up a carbon tzibur. Carbon tzibur is all or nothing. If the reason is like what you said to Rav Papa, then why did Rabbi Yehuda say a different reason? He should have said your reason. I argue in Rav Papa, the reason for Rabbi Yehuda is Talmud Aruchu b'fiv shel Rabbi Yehuda. It was something that he frequented his mouth. He said this often. She'ein carbon tzibur chol. That's all it is. The tzitz avad is muratz on everything. So why do you have to throw out even the tahor? Because there's a new rule. You never split up a carbon tzibur. Carbon tzibur all has to be uniform. So if the entire carbon tzibur is not mutter, then the entire carbon tzibur is possible. Same thing with the carbon pesach. If even one shevet cannot do it, the tahira, then nobody could do b'tahira because you don't split up the tzibur. Gewaltig. Zog tehelig Mishnah weiter. What a welcome change from the complexity of yesterday's Gemara. Zok the Gemara, hatoida mifageles es halechem, v'alechem ein mifageles hatoida. We know every carbon toida comes along with 40 breads. What if, actually, instead of me saying what if, let the Mishnah elaborates on the what if. Ketzad, here's exactly what this rule would mean in practical terms. Shochat es hatoida, while the shoichet was shechting the carbon toida, he had a kavanah of pigel. Lecho mimena lemocher. To eat the actual meat of the carbon toida lemocher, that's classic pigel. The halach is he v'halechem mifugalim. Not only is the meat of the carbon pigel, and there'll be a chi of course if you eat the meat of the carbon, but even the breads, which are part and parcel of this carbon toida, also have a chi of course to eat them. But what if his kavanah during the shechita was lechor min halechem lemocher? The meat I'm going to eat on time. His machshava of pigel was on the lechem. So there only halechem mifugal. The lechem is now also to be eaten with an isakaris, but vatoida eina mifugalas. The kavanah that you had by the lechem won't be mifagel the toida. So it almost sounds like the lechem is subordinate to the toida, to the carbon itself, but the carbon is not subordinate to the lechem. Hakvasim mifaglin es halechem. Now we're not talking about a carbon toida. Now we're talking about the kivsei atzeres. Hakavasim mefaglin es halechem. If you have kavana to eat the meat of the kivsei atzeres, chutz lizmanoi, not only will their meat be also to eat isachamur of kares, their breads as well. But v'alech einim mefaglin es hakvasim. Again, ketzad hasheicher es hakvasim lechol mehen lemachar heim v'alechem mefugalin lechol es halechem lemachar halechem mefugal v'akvasim einam mefugalin. So the obvious question is going to be, this is one halacha. Why did the Mishnah have to repeat it twice, Saibe a carbon toida and Saibe a kivsei atzeres, when in essence it's the same halacha? Zok the Heilige Gemara. My timer, Zok Rashi, my timer ha toida mifagelas lechem. What tethers the lechem to the actual carbon to say that if the carbon becomes pigel, the lechem is also pigel? Zok the Gemara, ilay mi mishum de Rav Kahana. If it's because of the Yosy that we were taught by Rav Kahana. How do I know that the lechem of the carbon toida are also referred to with the word toida? Shenemar, it says, v'hikriv ala zevach hatoida chalois. And Rashi says, if the chalois were not part and parcel of the toida, it should have said, v'hikriv chalois al zevach hatoida. You should be makriv chalois with the toida. Then it would sound like the chalois are distinct from the toida, but you're makriv them with the toida. But if the toida is vikriv al zevach hatoida chalois, it's mashur that the chalois are part of the toida. Let's see Rashi inside. Hatoida mefagelas lechem midahavel lemichtu v'hikriv chalois al zevach hatoida, but rather it says vikriv al hatoida al zevach hatoida chalois. The mashma toida hema chalois. It's mashma the toida is the chalois. Hilchach ki yomar al manas lechal toida lemachar have a lechem bechlal. Fact Gemara. So if a lechem is part and parcel of the toida, so then it should work both ways. Yochi ibchanami. If you had a kavanah to eat the lechem chutz lizmanoi, why doesn't it make the actual carbon pigel as well? Zok Gemara haloi kasha. That's not fair because the lechem ikri toida. From the pasuk we see that the lechem is called the toida, but the toida avol toida the bachzik and avol toida loy ikri lechem. Zok Gemara. Okay, so that explains how by the carbon toida the lechem is subordinate to the toida, but the toida is not subordinate to the lechem. But how are you going to pass this on to the kivsei atzeres? Elhoda katani hakvasim mefaglin es halechem, v'halechem einim mefaglis hakvasim lechem heicha ashkechon the ikri kvasim. Where did you ever find there a pasuk talking about kivsei atzeres that makes the lechem subordinate to them? Ella, you know what you're going to be forced to say? A svara. Hainu taima, the reason why by the kivsei atzeres the lechem is subordinate to the kvasim is because lechem glal toida vein toida glal the lechem. You're going to have to say the svara is not because of the pasuk that refers to the lechem as a toida. It's just in general. The lechem is glal toida. As Rashi says, toida ikar. Toida is the ikar carbon. The lechem tafel. How do you know that? Because what gives the lechem kedusha? What makes them into the carbon? At what point do they become kedusha saguf? Zok Rashi, the shchitas toida mikachel lechem. When they shech the toida, that's when the lechem takes on kedusha saguf. Kedamrina beperak hatoida yakrav karbonoi malamed she'ein halechem kadosh ela b'shchitas hazevach. So we see that the Torah sets out the rules that the lechem is subordinate to the toida. V'chein lechem gal kfasim. Now you could say the same svara when it comes to the kivsei atzeres and the shter lechem. The shchitas kfasim mikachim lelechem. What gives the shter lechem by shavuos the kedusha saguf? It's the shchitas hazevach. Like it says in Perikat Chelas, which we're going to see in Daf Mem Zayin. Okay, gewaltig. Zogt the Gemara weiter. Hanyu taima lechem glal toida ve'toida glal lechem, and therefore lechem glal the kvasim ven kvasim glal the lechem. Zogt the Gemara itzrichi. We knew, even though it's exactly the same svara that applies to the toida and the lechamim and its relationship with the lechamim, hu adin that same svara applies to the kivsei atzeres. So why did the Mishnah have to list these two cases distinctly and separately? Utzrichi. The Yashamin on Toida, if the Mishnah only told us about the Toida, I would have said Hasam Dafka by the Toida, who the Chimefagel Belechem, Loy Mefagel Toida. Only by the Toida would you say that the being Mefagel the Lechem will not be Mefagel the Toida. You know why? Mishim de Loy Huskaku Zel Lozeh Bitnufa. When you make the Tnufa on the carbon, you do not make a tenufa on the bread. By the carbon toida, you make the tenufa on the meat of the carbon, but not on the bread of the carbon. So they're somewhat disengaged. So that's why maybe a machshav of pigel related to the breads will not impact the carbon. Aval kazim by the kivsei atzeres, the huskaku zelazeh tenufa. The tenufa that was done on the meat and the breads together. So you see they're much more connected. They're much more one and the same carbon. Therefore, tzricha, that's why the Mishnah had to tell us that there as well, the kavanis pigel on the lechem will not impact the carbon itself. Rashi just sticks in as an aside, toida ein manifan oisa imachalois. The toida, you make a tnufa on the carbon, but not on the chalois. Avol kfasa manifan oisa imachalois, t'chsiv, v'heinev oisam hakayin t'chsiv al lechem. So it's lifted together. Zok to Gemara weiter. Boy minei Rabbi Lazar meirav. Hashoichet es ha-toida. Someone shechted a carbon toida. Again, you have a schizophrenic weirdo who has these wacky kavanas, and he's shechs the toida with the kavana lechel kezais mimena umi lachma lemachar. He doesn't have kavana to eat a full kezais of meat lemachar. He doesn't have a full kavana of achilas kezais of the meat, nor does he have a kavana of a full kezais of the bread. But combined, he'll take a half a gazayis of the meat to eat lemachar and a half a gazayis of the bread lemachar. What would be the halacha? Zok to Gemara right off the bat, lif gulei toida loy b'boili. This for sure will not be mefagel the toida itself, because hashta kul milachma loy mifkala. Even if you had a full gazayis of the lechem, meaning you had a proper achila at least somewhere, it wouldn't be mefagel the carbon itself. It would only be mefagel the bread. Mimeno milachma. If you don't even have a full achila, unless you combine the half of kazayis here and the half of kazayis there, which is even a shvachere achila, miboyi, surely that would not be mefagel the carbon. But kikam aboili lefgula lechem. Our whole shaila is, will the lechem become possible? Mi mitztarfa toida lefgula lechem. Could you combine the half a gazayis of the kavanah to eat a half a gazayis of meat to the lechem, so that now at least the lechem will be pigel? Oiloi, or maybe not. Omar lei. So Rav answered back, Af bezu, even in this case, halechem mifugol, dafka the lechem is mifugol, vatoida eino mifugelos. The lechem is mifugol and not the toida. Frektamar, why? I have a very good argument to say that the breads should not become pigel. Why should the breads not become pigel? Leimo kal v'chomer. Let's make a kal v'chomer. Uma mifagel ein mispagel. Madach, the half a kezayis of meat that we're saying is going to help towards, your argument is going to be, it's going to work towards being mifagel the lechem Ein mispagel in itself does not become pigel in this scenario, right? The Gemara said loy mi boyd, for sure the basar does not become pigel. So madich the mifagel, the half a gezayis that you want to be the catalyst to be mifagel the lechem in itself will not become pigel. Habal mifagel v'loy pigel. So the half a gezayis, the kavanah for the half a gezayis of the eating the bread, chutz l'zmanoi, which can't even be mifagel the basar. Surely it itself should not become pigel. That is the kal v'chomer the Gemara makes. Let's have a look at Rashi. Toida mefagel. Toida shesaya lefagel lechem. The toida, which we were saying is going to be included in the kezayis, in the combination of the kezayis, to be mefagel the lechem. Nevertheless, ein mispagel. The toida itself, the meat will not become pigel. Ki de kamrina na toida in the mefugelas. So abal lefagel, meaning the chatzi zayis shalechem, habal lefagel, gam es a toida. It tried to be mefagel the toida, but v'loy piglu, it didn't work to make the basar pigel. Einodin shaloi yispagel, surely in itself should not become pigel. Zog the Gemara, is this an appropriate kal v'chomer? I'm going to show you a similar scenario where this kal v'chomer was not made. Why? V'atanya we learned. Ma'isa ve'echad. Now we know the halacha is, if someone has a kerem, and you come and plant zroyim, you plant other types of seeds in that kerem, and they grow together a little bit, they will become klaya kerem, and everything becomes osir. So you have this tzaddik, with a capital P in front, that decided that he's going to go into his friend's beautiful kerem that has just blossomed fruits, and he's going to plant now zroyim there, which is his own zroyim. He's going to want to plant his own zroyim in Yanim's kerem. He's literally trespassing. So shazar karmi shal chaver ismodar, so that as it grows together, it will become klaya kerem. And the question is, what do you do over here? Uba ma'isel iftei chachamim. They asked the shayla in front of the chacham, this poor vineyard owner, due to no fault of his own, because some tzaddik came in and planted zroyim. Now should his kerem be osir? So you know what the chacham paskin? But osir as zroyim. The zroyim that grew became together with his vineyard, they're going to be osir. So this guy's plan didn't work. His zroyim will be osir. But v'tiru es gefanim. But they said that the person's vineyard is going to be mutter, it will not become osir b'chlai kerem. Here also you should make the same kal v'chomer if your kal v'chomer is valid. V'yamai lema kal v'chomer hu. Uma oiser madich the zroyim, which are trying to answer. I'm sorry, madich the grapes, which are going to be answering the zroyim. Einoi nesar, the grapes themselves don't become osir, as the chachamim paskin ve'tiru es gefanim. So habal lesar v'loy osar, the zroyim that are trying to answer the grapes and did not succeed, einoi din shaloy yisaser, surely they shouldn't be osir either. Based on your logic, based on your kal v'chomer, why didn't the chachamim make your kal v'chomer here? The fact that they didn't make it is proof that your kal v'chomer is faulty. Zok Gemara, no, my kal v'chomer is not faulty. There's a very good reason why they didn't make the kal v'chomer there. Because hachi ashta, hasam kanvus v'luf osratayr. Even though we know that klai zroyim, when you plant zroyim in a kerem, it becomes osir, that's not deraisa. That's only midrabanan. Because seeds are what we call annuals. They're not perennials. Annuals mean you have to replant them every year. They don't maintain their growth from year to year. The only type of plants that are bidaraisa, osir al klai zorim, that's only plants like canvas and luf, because they actually grow a stem and they're perennials. They'll grow back on their own from year to year. Does the article say what these two plants are? Canvas and luf?
It's a bean, type of bean.
Uh-huh.
Then he says it's sure, missions, let's look at the onions, the garlic.
And those don't grow from year to year. So it gets complicated.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's some type of bean. So hachiyash, hasam canvas v'lov asur Torah. Those are the deraises. There you can make a kal v'chomer. That nan oises adeu zuru a canvas aluf. Lo yezerei al gabeim shein oises l'shal shal in the last 3 years these plants. But Shar Royim, these Royim that this tzaddik planted in his friend's vineyard are only midrabanan hu dasiri. They're only also midrabanan, and therefore the Rabbanan decided, Hai the Avdi Surah, this tzaddik who was over in this and he planted Zroyim in Yenim's Kerem, Kansur Rabbanan. He'll get a knas. They answer those Royim only midrabanan. But Hai the Avdi Surah, but the owner of the vineyard who's innocent, he did nothing wrong at all, loy Kansur Rabbanan. So therefore you don't make kal v'chomer, because why should we punish somebody who didn't do anything wrong at all? But here, by the case of the person who had kavana to eat half a kazais of basar and half a kazais of lechem, chus lezmanoi, there the kal v'chomer would be appropriate. Avalacha lema kal v'chomer, that say the meat should not be osher machmas pigel, and say the bread should not be osher machmas pigel. V'yigademasmilo akfosim. There are those who had the exact same shaila by kfosim. So we just quoted this shaila by a toida, right? And we know in our Mishnah, toida and the kivsei atzeres are the same. So now we're going to get a beautiful chazorah of the identical Gemara, but we're going to repeat it with kfosim. This is like a very nice breath of fresh air, appropriate after you just shoveled snow, and Hashem's giving us a break on the Gemara at least. Ve'igod demasla kvasim. Boy mir rablos merav. Hashaychan ze kvasim lechol gezais mehen. Umilachmon ma'u lefkulei. Kvasim loikem miboili. Hashta kuloi milechem. Loi mefagli. So then mehenim alachmon miboy. Hika beboili lefkulei lechem. Mi mitzdarfi kvasim lefkulei lechem oiloi. So it's the identical shayla we had in a moment ago. Legabe Ataida, we're now applying to Kivsei Atzeres because we know they're parallel. They're even quoted in our Mishnah side by side. Amalei, what did he answer? So the Gemara asks, why not make that kal v'chomer? Meaning the meat of the kivsei atzeres. Habal v'hagel means the bread v'loy pigel that didn't succeed in making the meat pigel. Surely it should not become pigel. Zok the Gemara, mi amrin and kal v'chomer kagavna. Is that a val kal v'chomer? V'atanya ma'isa becha chazor karmish shal mother. And so on and so forth, and there the kal v'chomer was not made. Maha oiser, madich the grapes, einin esher don't become aser. Habol esar, the zroim v'loy aser, einin din shaloy yes aser. And the Gemara answered, hachiyash, hazum kamas v'loy aser toyer, shar zroim midarbanu dasiri, hai davidi surah kansur rabbanon, the davidi surah loy kansur rabbanon. Avalacha leima kal v'chomer. So we have two versions of where this shaila was asked. Was it asked by the toida, or was it asked by the kivsei atzeres? Zok the Gemara. Mana matni la toida. The first lashon who learns that the shaila was by the carbon toida, kol shekay kvasim. Surely by the kvasim, the meat will not become pigel, and neither will the bread become pigel because you have the kal v'chomer. But umanda matni la kvasim. But according to the second nusach, maybe kvasim hu the husku hu zelo zelat nufa. Kvasim that are connected to one another. Maybe there will you say that the breads become osir because they're connected to the kvasim. They're very connected. You even make nufa together. Aval toida the loy huskul zelo zebet nufa loy. Maybe over there they're not connected, and therefore the breads would not become osir. Gevaldik. Zok the heilige aval toida loy pashid loy the loy pagol lechem. Maybe the lechem won't be nispagel because it's not connected enough to the meat. Zok the more weiter. Rab Abba Zuti boy lahachi. This is how he presented the shaila. Boy mine Rab Elazar merav. Hashoichet es hakeves. Lechol kezayis mechaveroi lemocher mahu. There's two kivsei atzeres. You shech the keves number one, and you add the machshava of pickle to eat the other keves that you're not shechting now. Shaloi bizmanoi. Mahu. Do you say when he says chaveroi keves mashma? So what are the words? Hashoichet is a keves, lechel es chaveroi is kezayis mechaveroi lemocher. So his kavanah was, I'm shechting a keves, and he speaks out to eat its friend lemocher. Who is its friend? When he says I'm going to eat its friend lemocher, who does he mean the friend? Do you say keves mashma? Do you say he means the other animal? V'loy mefagel. You can't be mefagel carbon A by thinking about eating carbon B. Chos lezmanoi. When he said chaveroi lechem mashma, he means its friend, meaning the bread that accompanies this carbon. And therefore, umifagele. Amalei, so Rabbi Lozer answered, I have an answer for you. It's a Mishnah. It's a Nisua, our Mishnah. It's a Shachat Echad Min Akvosim, Lechol Mimenu L'Mochar, Hu Pigol V'Chaverei Kosher. Lechol Mechaverei L'Mochar, Shneim Ksherim. So that's Beferish, Mechaverei L'Mochar, Shneim Ksherim means that Alma Chaverei Keves Mashma means Chaverei must be Keves, because if it was the bread, it would have answered. So who said? Dilma the parish v'omar chavera kevesh. Maybe the Mishnah is speaking, even though the Mishnah doesn't speak out when he says chavera, he means kevesh. Maybe that's shot in the Mishnah that he did speak out to Ferish, that it would be the other animal and not the bread. So let's look at the Mishnah again. It's not over here. It's the next Mishnah. It's the next Mishnah. I guess it's even a later Mishnah. Okay. Zok the Gemara weiter. Hazevach mifagel es hanesachim. The zevach is mifagel the nesachim mishakitchu bechli. So a carbon shalomim comes along with nesachim. Right after you bring the carbon, you pour wine on the mizbeach. When does it make it pigel? At what point are the nesachim connected to the carbon? That if you add a kavanah pigel during the shchitas hazevach, that the wine of the nesachim also becomes pigel. That's only once we placed the yain in the klesharis, and now it became designated as the nesachim for the carbon diver meir. Hanesachim einam mefagel misazevach, but nesachim are not mefagel the zevach. Ketzad hashoycher es zevach lechal mimenu l'machar. Who unesachim mefugalin? Because the nesachim are subordinate to the carbon. But if he shechted the carbon with a machshava of l'hakar nesachav l'machar, then only on the nesachim mefugalin hazavach enim mefugol, which is a similar theme to what we've been learning, that the bread or the nesachim is subordinate to the carbon, but the carbon is not subordinate to the nesachim. Taner Rabbanan nischei behema chayov naleya mishum pigol. The nesachim of a carbon of a behema you're chayiv mishum pigol mipnei shedam hazevach matiron lekarev. Because once you make this rikas adam, that triggers that the nesachim can now be poured on the mizbeach. Diver Reb Meir. Amar lo Reb Meir. So they told Reb Meir, how could you say that? How could you say that the nesachim are tethered to the carbon? We know the halach is when you donate a carbon, you don't have to donate the nesachim the same day as the carbon. You could donate the carbon today, and you have 10 days to bring the nesachim. That surely wouldn't be tethered to a machshava of pigel. I didn't even bring it yet. So you see, it's not tethered to the carbon. So why should the machshava of pigel, of the basar, the carbon, be mefagel din nesachim? Amelen, so Mary said, you're right. But af ani lo yamarti, in a case where you didn't bring the nesachim together with the carbon, I agree with you that having a machshava of pigel by the carbon will not be mefagel din nesachim. I agree with that. I'm talking about a guy who brought the nesachim together with the carbon, and he was planning to do them all together. There, if he shechted the zevach with a machshava of pigel, there apostle the zvachim. But I told him, even if he brought it together, it's still not tethered to the carbon that he brought it with. You know why? Because on the whim he could change his mind. He has a right, even after the shechita, to say, you know what, I don't want to bring the nesachim for my carbon today. I'll bring it tomorrow. This I want to use for a different carbon. So you see, even if it's brought together, it's not tethered. Omar Rava, but Reb Meir doesn't agree with that. Because of Reb Meir, hukfu v'shchita kalach mitoida. Once you shecht it with the nesachim there, and you designated the nesachim should be part of this carbon, you cannot change it anymore. So it is tethered, and therefore Reb Meir's halacha is valid. Taner Rabbanan, the same thing would be with the loik shemen shal mitzayra. A mitzayra needs a loik shemen that they do zrika with, and they put it on his body. So the halacha is chayavin lo b'shum pigol. If in fact there was a machshava by the carbon to eat it chutz l'zmanoi, mipnei shedam osham matiroi lebahoinos. The dam osham, when you make the zrika of that osham, that's matter the oil now to be put on the bahoinos of the mitaher. So again, you see that the loik shemen is somewhat tethered to the carbon osham. Divrei Meir. It's not tethered because you don't even have to bring it the same day. I'm talking about when they were brought together and then they are tethered to each other. Even after the Zrika, you still could apply to a different nazir. You don't have to use it for this one. It's not tethered even at that point. He knows it is tethered. Once the shechita is made with this oil here that's designated for this nazir, and the shechita happens, now it's tethered. You cannot apply it to another nazir anymore. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we were zeicher to finish Daf Tezvav, and tomorrow we'll learn Daf Tezayin. And Baruch Hashem, today, Meir Shapiro humored me by making the Mishnah the first word on the next Daf. So I'm able to handle it.